Well, hello everyone in Burlington. I'm Burlington Mayor Marianne Mead Ward, and this is the next virtual installment of Burlington Matters. We're still doing the show, still trying to bring folks together in our community to give you information that we hope is helpful to you. So let's get right down to it. I have a great show again today, and with me today is Chris Glenn, our Director of Recreation Services at the city, and Tim Commisso, our City Manager. I know what's top of mind for our residents is what is the summer going to look like. You, I'm sure, heard the news that the city did cancel our programming until the end of Labor Day, which this year is quite late. It's the 7th of September. But at the same time, we are looking at if the situation changes, can we do some programming? Can we bring people back to our parks in an organized sport fashion? You can walk through our parks now, and there's some other activities you can do in our parks. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because I know people are really interested in what the city has planned for the summer. And we're also, courtesy of Tim, going to talk about what the financial picture looks like for the city and some of the other things that that we and myself with other mayors across Ontario and across the country are doing to address that. So we're going to get right down to it, and I am going to turn it over to Chris. Welcome. Thank you for
Thank
joining.
you.
Thank you for joining me this morning. So talk to us about the decision that you made. I know one of the first questions I've gotten, and I'm sure you've heard it, is why cancel all the way till Labor Day? Why not, a week or two or a month at a time, and leave that shred of hope for people that they might be able to have some programming? Let's start with that one.
Understood. Start with a good one. Yes, summer, of course, is a very, very busy time for us in general. What we determined was all the programming, the rentals, and the events that we had in place pre-pandemic, we could no longer operate, in our estimation, during the course of the entire summer. People had signed up for programs that would take them into Labor Day, events were being looked, etc. So fundamentally, what we decided to do was cancel, but I want to call it a reset. We took all those programs out and we looked at opportunities to bring things back when we could redesign, when we were able to modify programs, when restrictions were lifted, what could we put back in place so that then we could bring people back into various assets that we have, parks, community centers, etc. So some things have started to loosen up for us, and we're starting to see some of those things open up to us at this point, which is great. And I can give you a couple of examples if you like. We could get into golf as an example. That was one of the first ones that we were allowed to get back to business with, which was great. We got about a 2-week window to prepare. So things are different on the golf course. Golf itself is the same, but as an example, you enter through a door, you exit through another. When you go through the pro shop, we'll only have one person per cart, and we've extended the amount of time between tee-off times so that out on the course more so. That's an example, and in time we'll be able to add more of those components back in, perhaps the concessions, perhaps 2 people per cart as things evolve. Another one was community gardens. Those were some of the ones that came out early we were able to get back to. More recently, we've been able to get things along the lines of more single or individual types of activities. So you'll see things such as our tennis courts were reopened. People were asked to continue to social distance and whatnot, use their own equipment, etc. So they've reopened. Things such as gymnastics. I know our gymnastics clubs are getting ready to open in a different way, as well as things like figure skating are able to go back. So that's the next wave of things that can open. And you mentioned parks. So in our parks environment, certainly we want people to get outside and be active. We've been contained for so long. We got our skateboard parks are reopened. We can go out and utilize those. Our trails, of course, are open and available. You can use park benches, but remember, we're not cleaning those types of things. And sports fields, and I can talk more about that, but I'll pause in a moment for you to see if you want to follow up on something. But sports fields were reopened for general public use, as well as some sport bodies to use them into the future. I'll pause and see if you want to ask any further questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think the key word that we've been using around the city for some time now is redesign. That one of the questions that I've gotten, you have too, is why cancel the permits? Well, what you signed up for, what you paid for is not what you're going to get, even if some activity is allowed, what you signed up for. In some cases, I remember you mentioning to us that kids camps have 200 kids in them. You've got, 60 to 100 kids on a bus. That is not going to change. And the new directives from the province were they raised it from 5 to 10. Well, we're nowhere near what we used to be able to run in terms of our programming and events. And so, for me, it made sense to we're clearing it out. We're canceling because what you paid for, what you signed up for is not what we can offer. So we need to redesign it. And it's that word. It's these services, and you articulated it well. Here's what golf is going to look like. It's different. Here's what community gardens are going to look like. It's different than what it's redesigned. You can still do it, but it's going to be very, very different. And that's going to be the case for some time. So, and then there's this whole other level of authorization, but besides what the province and the city are doing, the sport governing bodies for those organizations that are sporting related. So to talk to us a little bit about that and the, what is happening with the sports fields and some of those more organized activities that right now our fields are still fenced off and closed.
Correct. Thank you. Yes. One of the requirements that we still have to deal with. So when it was announced that sports fields were open, that looked like it was we're open and back to regular business. That wasn't the case. There were some conditions attached to it. We still had to go with the gatherings of 5. We had to continue with our physical distancing. And as you mentioned, Mayor, the provincial sport organizations had to be affiliated with the provincial or national sport organization. And then you had to adhere to the requirements of your specific sport organization, comply with that before you could get back onto any of our sports fields and utilize them. So we've been working with our sport organizations, not only on the fields, but in other assets as well. What might it look like when you reopen? So using that example, soccer right now could put 1 coach and 4 people, perhaps, is what's going to happen for skills only, not competition, because we can't go into that at this point. In the first stage, we can't go there. And we anticipate that will be the same in worlds such as hockey, and you get into the gymnasium type programs. All those things will have to be refined and looked at. So we're working in higher cooperation with our sport organizations.
Thanks, Chris. I want to turn it over now to you, Tim, to talk to us about what the financial picture looks like. The city, when it comes to our recreation services, it's like a business. We get revenue in and we offer a program. And so just like many businesses out there, we're not getting those revenues. And yet our expenses are going up. So what's our picture now and what do you expect it to be? And great to have you on the show.
So thanks, your worship. Can you hear me okay?
You're good.
Great.
You're off mute.
Yeah, that's the biggest struggle for me right now is the mute button. So thank you very much. And as you know, your worship, we are reporting to council monthly on the financial impact of COVID. So we really started, understanding kind of what was going on, I would say probably in early April. When there were some big decisions made. And so what we're really seeing is the impact of closing our recreation facilities, canceling recreation programs during the spring session. We went fairly early to rear boarding on our transit because of, and also free transit. So if you look at kind of where we are now, what we're doing is really trying to monitor, what's been the impact directly. And then what are we forecasting? So right now we're forecasting from July essentially to the end of the year. So what we reported in May, and this I believe is all online or all part of the committee report, so it's public, was that we felt with everything, and the 2 big impacts on revenues are Parks and Rec revenues. So we are anticipating we'll lose about 3.1 million. But the offset to that is we also laid off over almost 700 part-time staff. So unfortunately, we had to make that decision early. So that's, for the most part, offset a lot of the revenue loss for Parks and Rec. But I want to talk, or Recreation Service, I want to talk about moving forward. Transit, essentially, we've had to sort of just absorb that. We don't have the ability to, make up that revenue. It's about $1.5 million we project to the end of the year. We've also lost some revenue, certainly in providing free parking there's no parking fees downtown or in any of our lots that are usually paid lots. So that's another significant impact. So all told, we had projected and reported to council under a scenario that was what we called sort of a, not a worst case, but a kind of a realistic case, about $9.2 million in lost revenues. However, we believe we've been able to offset most of that going forward with savings, and also where we have reserves that are specific to that particular revenue area. So in the case of parking, we have a healthy parking reserve. So what we're saying to council is we think that as long as we move forward, in a very prudent way, well managed, that our overall impact at the end of the year, very best case would be a few $100,000 negative. Worst case would be somewhere in the range of about 2 million, but it really depends on also our ability to bring back services like recreation programs, transit, so we're really applying sort of a monthly update and looking at, a couple scenarios. I will say that, one of the things we're dealing with right now, and I think you'll hear perhaps more from Chris about this, and also in the case of some of our parks operations, that we're actually incurring some additional costs. So when we bring back facilities, things like washrooms, when we open them, we have, park attendants, people that are quite frankly going to be in our parks just to ensure that, we're applying the precautions, whether it's cleaning, just control. So we're really closely monitoring what the impact of actually bringing services on. And I will say, as you know, Marianne, that we report now to council on what we call service redesign and resumption, so that council's fully aware that this is the impact. So bottom line, we've lost a lot of revenues. We have direct cost savings. We've essentially squeezed the budget for everything we possibly can. No discretionary spending, in the hopes, I think, that we can get to a year end where it's realistic, manageable. But we're not going to be in a situation, I think, where without using reserves, or hopefully getting support, particularly from federal, provincial governments, that we're able to get back to balance. It's not a deficit. We don't run deficits, but we will have at the end of the year to have to make some decisions about covering off what I call essentially a net unfavorable variance at year end. So hope that helps. And we will
Absolutely.
be reporting back on the 11th again with our June financial update to council.
Thank you. And yes, you mentioned the request from municipalities. So the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, which I'm a part of, and it includes any municipality in Ontario that is over 100,000 people. So we're close to 200 in Burlington now. So LUMCO has endorsed a request from both federal and provincial governments to give municipalities COVID-related funding. We've seen revenues plummet, but some of our costs are still the same, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But as you said, Tim, we've at the city tried to cut any non-essential spending, defer programs, had layoffs of our part-time staff that were delivering programs. But even with all of that, we've also seen increased costs as a result of COVID, and that's just going to go up. And I want to come back in a minute to Chris to talk about some of those additional costs that might be incurred because of the new way that we have to do recreation services and everything else. And the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which Burlington, of course, is a part of, has asked the federal government for $10 billion in new money relief for municipalities to, again, cover off some of what we're facing. So I want to go to you, Chris. Talk to us about, what is different and what some of those additional costs are going to be, and is that going to have an impact on the fees that we charge or not? Are we going to absorb that? Over to you.
Thank you. And perhaps I'll use your example of camps, where before we would have had perhaps 200 people for, say, in a gymnasium, multiple rooms, etc. We can't do that anymore. We did just get guidelines that we can look towards implementing something this summer if we get the green light. And it's going to be in the order of magnitude of 4 campers to 1 staff, kind of 10 as a one group. Items such as that group can't be in contact with another group. They have to share their own space with amongst that cohort, etc. So with that, you're going to see higher costs associated with us from the staffing side to participant level. You're also going to see us having to put more resourcing into cleaning to make sure that things are safe for people to participate and whatnot. So with that, you're going to see increased in expenses to run a program for fewer people. And at this point, we haven't landed on what the fees will be for folks, but we're certainly trying to keep them affordable because we know that camping in the summer is an important service that we provide. And as people are able to get back to work, we know that that's going to be required. So that's an example of a service that we're bringing in, quite frankly, to council next Thursday as a potential cost impact for us to consider putting that service back in when we can. Other ones you'll see next week are pools and arenas, etc.
That all good news, I think, for folks who are, we're all in isolation overload. I think everyone is just itching to get out with the weather. We've all been on lockdown and isolating or sheltering in our houses. And so I know people are really looking forward to a safe way, and that's the key word: safe for you, safe for our staff, safe for the participants. So, that's what's really critical here. And when you look at the camp program, they're never run at a break even. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. So the city already does provide, a subsidy. I don't know if you know off the top of your head what it is, Chris, but we already provide that service for our residents at I'll say at a loss, if you will, but it's not a loss, it's a gain for the community. But we subsidize that, so we will most likely have to continue to subsidize that service so that we can offer that to our community.
I don't have a specific number for camps, but I try to use the word we invest in our community. Is how we tend to try to frame it for folks. And of course, certain programs are more investment than others for our community.
That's great. Thank you. It's a good way to put it. It's the same argument we have about transit. Is it a subsidy or an investment? It's obviously an investment in equity and accessibility for those folks who need to get to a job or get to social programs or get to school and don't have a car or choose that. So good way to put it. Tim, I want to come back to you and talk about the business of the city continuing. So throughout the COVID pandemic, we have looked at ways to try and continue to deliver the whole range of services for our community outside of dealing with a pandemic. So what's new? How have we been able to not only keep our staff safe, but continue to deliver the services that those members of our staff workforce provide to the community?
Okay, thank you very much, Marianne. Excellent question. It's actually a fairly complex question because we're operating sort of in a different environment. What we're doing is we're bringing services on. Sorry, let me back up. Some of our services continued from day one. They were deemed essential. So anything that involved, certainly emergency response, our fire department, our transit, we kept, services running, our bylaw enforcement. But a lot of the services that, you might thought we would have shut down, things like our, facility maintenance, park maintenance, we kept going because those are assets that we need to maintain. So we have gradually brought on services back. Chris mentioned Tyndega Golf Course, but it's a lot broader. One of the things we will be doing actually next week is sharing with council at a glance all the services that are now currently operating and have, which ones have been somewhat redesigned. So our goal is to get back to ideally providing all of the services that, people in Burlington have really treasured. And I think it's fun, an essential part of the quality of life of this community. But we have to do that in a measured way. And we have to do that in a way that ensures that we continue to really focus on what our goal is. And that is to protect the community and also protect city staff. The virus is still out there. It's alive and well. We keep close eye on it, but we've been fortunate in Burlington, I think, in terms of the to the extent to which they're spread. We have not had any city staff infected with the virus. So I go back to you know, we're being very diligent and working every day, just to make sure that when we bring a service on, when we bring something to council, that we can ensure it's provides the community a safe an environment to continue to use, the wonderful services that we offer. But they are different. So we call that service redesign. We don't want to get too fancy with it, but I think what we do is we put it through a process of really looking at how do we do that. We expect over the next month, and we take our direction from the province as much as we can on what services are now permitted. So things like playgrounds, splash pads, those are just take for granted summer services that we provide, but we no longer take them for granted because they have to be done in a certain way. The big one I think that people are really disappointed with is the ability to do sporting events on our sports fields. We have literally hundreds of sports fields, with different types of sports. Well, those aren't happening in large size. So those are the kind of things I think that we've got a really close eye on how we do it, but we have to do it in a way I think that's responsive and in keeping with the guidelines that we have or what we put in place. So it's definitely a balancing act, and we're doing our best, but sometimes people would like to see things sooner, and all I can say is we're working hard to do what we can.
Well, and I think, there's a lot of confusion, if you will, in the community about who does what, who has the power to do different things. And because we're the most accessible level of government, people can stop me in the grocery store, and they often do. They ask, why isn't this business deemed essential or non-essential, and why have you ordered this to be shut down, and so forth. I get all of those questions, and I know all of us do, because we're the most accessible level of government directly to our community. We live here, and people see us, virtually now every day, and so there's a great graphic out there that it's on social media about which level of government makes which decisions as it relates to COVID-19, and I've found that really helpful to let people know that if you are concerned about an essential business, should it be deemed that's a provincial decision. So there are a number of facilities that we can't open right now because of the provincial order. We support them being closed. We understand that it's for the health and safety of our kids and our staff and everybody in our community. But we're going to be ready to, once the provincial order changes on any number of services that are out there, we're going to be ready to offer those. So, and that's what Chris and his team have been working on. But you've also been working on virtual programming, and we haven't really talked about that. Almost from the beginning, you had a call program, you've got some digital programming that you're working on. I know there's resources online. So talk to us about some of the alternatives, because those orders are still in place and we have to respect them. And so for right now, what are the alternatives for people?
Excellent. Thank you for that. Certainly, this is something that we were thrust into, the whole virtual programming. And quite frankly, I think this will stay with us as a silver lining of what we're going through right now. So I'll direct people to go to burlington.ca/active@home, and you'll see a whole host of things. And I've got it up on my screen here. A couple of examples. We have something called Do the 30-60 Play Challenge. We do that in the winter. We want to get people outside and play. What that means is do 30 activities over 60 days with your family, send in photos of your activities, and it's a great way for people to do things as a family. The one you mentioned as well, it's called Telepals. That's a new program that we've put in. It's not new in terms of a program, but it's really targeted at our older adult population more so, just using a phone. They don't need to use a virtual platform like what we are. Many of them need to use just a phone tool, and they can call in. We have a series of speakers that are on and opportunities for training, opportunities just to connect with people and be able to kind of feel less isolated. Then there's a whole host of programs on creative. We've got some staff that have gone in and done some things like dancing popcorn and a jewelry tree and various things on here for people to do. Fitness type programs. We have a number of staff working you through fitness programs. Outdoor games such as snakes and ladders. Our golfing folks have got things on here as well. Some science as well. A little dry land training for our swimmers and water safety. and then connections to the arts community. And we're adding on new videos through our YouTube channel on a daily basis. So I'd recommend go and check those out for yourself personally, as well as for your children that I'm sure are looking for activities as well. And parents are looking for things for them to do too. So check that out. We will continue to modify and add on to that.
Fabulous. Thank you. There's a lot of resources, burlington.ca. Right from the homepage, you can connect to a lot of the things that Chris has been talking about. We are out of time. So in one word or less, I'm going to ask you what you are most, well, maybe 2 words, what you're most looking forward to doing once the lockdown, the pandemic has passed us. Maybe I'll start with you, Tim. Tell us what you want to do.
I think people might know I have a hometown called Thunder Bay that has a little place up there on a lake, and that's definitely where I want to get to at some point, just to enjoy kind of a peaceful summer night. And
Sounds awesome.
I love Burlington. I think Burlington and Thunder Bay, I love the fact that they both have beautiful waterfronts, but when you're on a little lake by yourself, I think that's about as nice as it can get.
Awesome. Chris?
I'm in the same camp. I'd love to be out at cottages with friends, big campfire going on, barbecue, and playing some lawn games of some sort, and just kind of interact, giving everyone a big hug.
Yeah.
Big hugs for sure, with oysters and martinis with my friends. That's for me. We are out of time. Thank you so much, Chris and Tim, our city manager, Chris, our director of recreation services. This has been another installment of Burlington Matters. Thanks for joining us.